When the sky fell silent, the morning sun painted the clouds in shades of amber and gold as Flight 447 climbed steadily through the peaceful sky. Captain James Mitchell adjusted his headset and glanced at the instruments with practiced ease. After 23 years of flying, mornings like this still filled him with quiet satisfaction. The Boeing 737 hummed smoothly beneath his hands, carrying 147 passengers toward their destination. In seat 128, Emma Rodriguez pressed her face against the window, watching the world shrink below. Her curly brown hair caught the sunlight streaming through the small portal, and her eyes sparkled with wonder. This was her first flight, and everything fascinated her: the way the houses looked like tiny toys, how the roads became thin ribbons, and how the clouds seemed close enough to touch. "Are you excited about visiting Grandma?" her mother asked, smoothing Emma's hair with gentle fingers. Emma nodded enthusiastically, clutching her favorite pink teddy bear closer to her chest. "Bear wants to see the mountains too," she whispered, making her mother smile. The flight had been perfectly routine for the first hour. Passengers read books, dozed peacefully, or chatted quietly with their neighbors. The flight attendants moved gracefully through the aisles, offering drinks and snacks with practiced smiles. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then, without warning, the plane shuddered. Captain Mitchell's hands moved instinctively to the controls as warning. Lights began flickering across his instrument panel. The smooth hum of the engines changed to an irregular, concerning rhythm. His co-pilot, Sarah Chen, leaned forward with growing alarm as more alerts began sounding. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with concern. "I'm not sure," Captain Mitchell replied, his experienced fingers dancing across switches and controls. "We're losing hydraulic pressure in multiple systems." The plane shuddered again, more violently this time. Passengers looked around nervously as their drinks rattled on their tray tables. The smooth flight had become something entirely different, something frightening. In the cockpit, Captain Mitchell worked frantically to understand what was happening to his aircraft. The control systems were failing one by one, like dominoes, falling in slow motion. First the hydraulics, then the electronic flight controls, and finally the backup systems that should have saved them. "We're at 15,000 feet and losing altitude," Sarah reported, her voice steady despite the growing crisis. "The controls aren't responding." Captain Mitchell pulled back on the yoke, but the plane continued its gentle descent. He pressed buttons, flipped switches, and tried every procedure he had learned in decades of flying. Nothing worked. The aircraft was no longer under his control. "We need to prepare for emergency landing," he said quietly, the weight of responsibility heavy in his voice. "Alert the cabin crew." The announcement came over the intercom, but serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some technical difficulties. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened." Emma looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Mummy, why does the pilot sound worried?" Her mother forced a smile, though her hands trembled slightly. "I'm sure everything will be okay, sweetheart. The pilots are very smart." But in the cockpit, Captain Mitchell was running out of options. Every system he tried failed to respond. The plane continued its slow descent, and he could feel the aircraft becoming less stable with each passing minute. His hands moved across the controls with desperate precision, but nothing changed. "I've tried everything," he whispered to Sarah, his voice barely audible above the warning alarms. "The plane isn't responding to anything." For the first time in his career, Captain Mitchell felt helpless. The aircraft was falling slowly but steadily, and he could do nothing to stop it. The ground was getting closer, and 147 lives depended on him finding a solution that seemed impossible. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt despite her mother's protests. Something was pulling her toward the front of the plane, a feeling she couldn't explain. She hugged her teddy bear tighter and began walking up the aisle, her small feet steady despite the plane's uneven movement. "Emma, come back here," her mother called, but Emma continued forward with quiet determination. The flight attendants were too busy preparing for emergency procedures to notice the small girl making her way toward the cockpit. Emma reached the reinforced door and knocked softly, her small hand barely making a sound against the heavy metal. Captain Mitchell heard the gentle tapping and turned to see a young girl standing in the doorway. Her presence was so unexpected that for a moment he forgot about the failing aircraft. "Hello," Emma said simply, holding up her pink teddy bear. "Bear thinks you look sad." "Sweetheart, you need to go back to your seat," Captain Mitchell said gently, though something in the child's calm presence made him pause. Emma stepped into the cockpit, unafraid of the flashing lights and warning sounds. She looked at the instrument panel with curious eyes, then at the captain's worried face. "My daddy fixes things when they're broken," she said thoughtfully. "He always says that sometimes you have to ask nicely." She reached out and placed her small hand on the center console, right next to a red button that Captain Mitchell had tried countless times, but instead of pressing it, she simply rested her palm there and closed her eyes. "Please, airplane," she whispered. "We just want to go home." Captain Mitchell watched in amazement as something impossible happened. The warning lights began to dim, one by one. The irregular engine noise smoothed into a steady rhythm. The controls that had been frozen suddenly responded to his touch. That's not possible, Sarah breathed, staring at the instruments in disbelief. But Emma just smiled, as if she had expected this all along. Bear knew you could do it, she said to the airplane, patting the console like she might pet a friendly dog. Captain Mitchell tested the controls carefully, hardly daring to believe what was happening. The plane was responding normally again, as if nothing had ever been wrong. All systems showed green lights, and the aircraft climbed steadily back to its proper altitude. How did you? He started to ask, but Emma was already heading back to her seat, her teddy bear tucked securely under her arm. Sometimes things just need to know that someone believes in them, she said over her shoulder, her voice carrying a wisdom far beyond her years. The rest of the flight passed without incident. Captain Mitchell landed the plane safely, and passengers disembarked with grateful hearts, never knowing how close they had come to disaster. Emma walked off the plane hand in hand with her mother, chatting excitedly about seeing her grandmother. Later, mechanics would examine the aircraft thoroughly and find nothing wrong with any of its systems. Every component tested perfectly, as if the malfunction had never occurred. Captain Mitchell filed his report, but never mentioned the little girl who had somehow saved them all. Some mysteries are too beautiful to explain, and some miracles are too precious to question. On that golden morning when the sky fell silent and hope seemed lost, a child's simple faith had restored more than just an airplane's controls. It had restored the wonder of believing in impossible things. Emma never forgot her first flight, and neither did Captain Mitchell. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he would remember her words about asking nicely and believing in things, and he would smile, knowing that some of life's most important lessons come from the smallest teachers.